How does it feel? My marriage is finished. It's odd, but admitting it aloud is painful. It's not as if the realization is new, it's been dawning on me for a while. But today, hitting a certain milestone made it all the more real. The toughest part is feeling like I've failed. It's not that I was neglectful or distant. I wasn't the type to prioritize friends over my spouse or to bury myself in work to the point of becoming strangers. I always put Trisha first. I never missed an anniversary or birthday. I rushed home from work daily, dedicating every possible moment to her. I constantly sought advice on keeping our relationship vibrant and applied it diligently. Essentially, I gave my all to make our marriage work. Some might think I was too accommodating, but I saw it as necessary. Trisha's past marriage had been a nightmare due to her ex's cruel behavior. She warned me that the worst characters don't always show their true colors immediately, likening them to nature's most dangerous beings, which often appear harmless or appealing at first. On the day I finalized our divorce, I found myself at the local bar, a place just a short walk from what used to be our shared home. The pain of referring to it as my house instead of our house was sharp. Despite having been to this bar numerous times, I had never been there alone. It was always with Trisha or friends, making me familiar with the staff. Ironically, the person I was there to meet frequented this place too. He arrived shortly after me, parking his car next to mine. We got out at the same time. "Nice car," he greeted with a smile. "Thanks," I replied. "You seem in good spirits." "I am," he confessed. "Today, I finally resolved a situation that had been bothering me for too long. It's all sorted now, and it's time to look forward to the future." "That does sound like a cause for celebration," I remarked. "Indeed, it is," he answered with a smile. "Well, I'm here for something quite ordinary," I mentioned as we headed towards the bar's entrance. "Is it just a night out with pals?" "Not really," I responded. "It's more about work-related matters." He gave me a puzzled look. "Actually," I continued, "I'd appreciate it if you could help me with something simple, and I'll cover your drinks in return." Judging by his modest vehicle, I guessed he appreciated a good deal, so offering him a drink seemed like a good way to engage him. "What do I need to do?" Just then, I spotted him, I remarked as we entered the bar, pointing towards a lone man at a back table with a laptop connected to a device. I guided my new acquaintance towards the man. "I work for a company that requires all its employees to be thoroughly vetted," I explained. "We even undergo regular lie detector tests to ensure we're not compromising the company's integrity. If you could just observe my upcoming test, I'll take care of your drinks." "That sounds easy enough," he replied. "It might actually be interesting to see." As we settled down, the technician prepared the polygraph, attaching sensors to my wrist and temples before starting the device. "All right, Ed, let's begin," the technician stated. "Answer with a yes or no. We'll cover questions about work and possibly your private interests." I nodded, and my companion appeared genuinely intrigued. "Since your last test, have you been completely truthful in your expense reports?" "Yes," I answered. "Have you been completely honest with all of your clients?" He followed up. "Yes," I replied again. "Have you taken anything that doesn't belong to you?" "No," I responded. "Do you believe you could perform better in your boss's role?" "Affirmative," I replied. "Do you desire his role?" "Indeed," I responded. "Have you ever been physically aggressive toward your spouse?" "Absolutely not," I asserted. "Have you ever been violent toward any woman?" "Never," I affirmed. "Do you neglect your marital responsibilities for your career?" He asked. "Definitely not," I answered. "Which takes precedence, your marriage or your profession?" "My marriage, without a doubt," I declared. "Jobs come and go." The examiner seemed intrigued, closely monitoring the machine's needles as each question was posed and responded to. "Have you ever been unfaithful to your spouse?" "Never," I asserted. "Have you ever discussed job opportunities with other firms while employed here?" "Not at all," I stated. "Have you exerted maximum effort to fulfill your tasks to the best of your ability?" He probed. "Not entirely," I confessed. "Please clarify," he requested. "I'm fully committed to my work from 8 to 4, I explained. "But once it's time to leave, my focus shifts to my wife. I devote myself to her happiness. Sure, I could stay late or bring work home, but my marriage is more significant to me than any job." Observing the chart, both he and the witness seemed satisfied as he began to pack away the equipment. "How did I do?" I inquired. He hesitated. "I'm not sure Bill will appreciate all of your responses," he admitted. "However, you were honest throughout. You didn't conceal anything. The fact that you aspire for your boss's position and the missed overtime opportunities might not present you in the best light. But your emphasis on the significance of your marriage and your wife should have a positive impact." He passed a form and a pen to my companion for a signature. "All right," I responded, turning to my new acquaintance. "Shall we order our first round of drinks?" I signaled a server to approach our table and placed our orders. "That was quite the session," he commented. "Do you work in sales?" "Yes," I confirmed. "It's surprising that they probe into your personal life. Isn't that a bit over the line?" "Our compensation package is generous enough that we agree to it," I explained. "From what you've shared, you seem to deeply care for your wife," he observed with a smile. "I strive to be the best partner possible," I remarked. If we ever part ways, I wouldn't want it to be due to my actions. Unfortunately, many marriages don't last. When we met, she was trying to distance herself from her previous husband, who was very unkind to her. He was neglectful and abusive, making her feel isolated and devalued. She was desperate for an escape but worried about how she would manage on her own. She was ready to take the risk to get away from that dreadful situation. It took several encounters at a common spot for her to open up fully. By our second or third conversation, I felt a strong connection to her. She was 32 and I was 34, and everything just seemed to click. She appeared much younger than her age. As we continued to date, it became natural for us to be affectionate, and I started to envision a future where she could be free from her abuser. After a few more encounters, she felt that her husband was growing suspicious. Suspicious of what? I probed. That I'm developing an interest in someone else, she confessed eagerly. I felt a twinge of jealousy and discomfort until she implied that her interest was in me. She proposed we find a more secluded spot for our meetings. By our second rendezvous in a discreet location, she confided that she needed my help. I was convinced she needed financial help to escape her difficult situation, and I was prepared to assist. I harbored a hope that she wouldn't drift too far from me because I was developing strong feelings for her. I don't want to cross any boundaries, she expressed. But it's been ages since I've felt the comfort of an embrace, and I'm hesitant to ask, but could you? In the motel room, we sat on the bed where I held her close, both of us fully clothed. The physical connection was strong, with her back against me, intensifying my feelings. Our hands intertwined, and in the comforting silence, we found a moment of peace. When she left, the emotional intensity was overwhelming. She took my contact details to stay in touch. She reached out the next day, expressing her gratitude for the simple act of touch and how it revived her spirit. I reflected on the dire situation with her partner. We met again, this time in a different motel, maintaining discretion due to her ongoing divorce process. Our encounters were becoming more intense, leaving me even more emotionally charged. The following day, her tone seemed distant over the phone, which made me wonder about her feelings. She asked me to wait a moment on the call, promising her full attention shortly. 6 weeks had passed since our first meeting, and my fixation on her grew. She was beautiful in my eyes, and I felt a possessive attachment, having forsaken other romantic interactions for her. She called back later, emotional, pleading for a conversation. She explained her earlier distraction was due to her finalizing something important, triggered by hearing my voice. Curious, I asked, "What did you feel compelled to do?" She responded, "I wasn't certain about my decision until I heard you speak. Your voice reminded me of what I needed to do. I signed up for an online dating site," she mentioned. "You should tread carefully," I advised. "Many men on those sites have narrow intentions." "That won't be an issue," she replied, hinting at a shared perspective. I was taken aback, and my silence seemed to encourage her to continue. "You're decent, Ed," she shared. "Being close to you has ignited feelings in me, feelings of warmth and excitement." The connection we shared was invigorating. Recently, it intensified my emotions from mere warmth to a deeper yearning. In those moments, I longed for more, yet you were respectful. My husband has been distant for years, Ed. Our interactions were always fleeting and unsatisfying. Can I be completely honest with you, Ed? Of course, I responded. I envision a future with you, a long-term commitment. But in the immediate sense, I'm yearning for intimacy, something I'm missing severely. I regret turning to online dating, and I know it might be partly due to our recent closeness. Your presence and touch have amplified my longing. I find myself increasingly distracted and unsettled. We both paused, then I hesitantly suggested, perhaps we could meet tomorrow. I didn't fully realize it then, but she was gradually pushing my boundaries. Each step felt like choosing the lesser of two difficult options, and I found myself considering an affair. Meeting her the next day, her relaxed demeanor and smile put me at ease. Her words sometimes puzzled me, but my desire to trust her overshadowed my doubts. It felt as though my rational thinking was clouded by overwhelming emotions. I know this seems questionable, she reasoned, but if you think about it, there's no harm done. My husband won't miss what he's not interested in, and since we might have a future together, it feels like a natural step. When we were alone, the atmosphere changed, becoming more intimate and personal. Her body felt familiar and comforting against mine. In that moment, my feelings and desires were in stark contrast to my usual restraint, reflecting the complexity and intensity of our connection. I caressed her gently, feeling the softness of her skin under my touch. Our lips met in a tender kiss, her taste reminiscent of fresh cherries. In a smooth motion, she shifted beneath me, inviting a closer connection. Our encounter was passionate, a dance of intimacy that lasted through the afternoon. I even concocted an excuse for missing work, lost in the moment's fervor. That week tested my focus. Mornings became a rush of work to free up afternoons for our rendezvous. She shared dreams of a future together, away from her current ties. I encouraged her to take decisive steps, to start anew without looking back, promising a fresh start in my world. Surprisingly, she didn't resist but instead proposed a future together, post-divorce. I wholeheartedly agreed, enveloped in love. Actions were swiftly taken, leading to an uncontested separation due to irreconcilable differences. Without children or claims, the process was straightforward, though her ex resisted initially. Marriage followed her divorce, and for years, bliss reigned until subtle shifts hinted at growing distance. Despite my efforts to bridge the gap, our connection seemed to ebb away, leaving me grappling with a sinking relationship. Accepting the inevitable, I released her from our bond. Over drinks, a friend empathized, lamenting the unfair return on my dedication and care. He suggested her past might have tainted her ability to appreciate a healthier relationship, hinting at the complexity of human emotion and the unpredictability of healing. Women can be perplexing. Many seem uninterested in genuine, kind-hearted men, favoring instead those with a rebellious edge. It's intriguing how they can be drawn to someone with a notorious history, believing they can transform him. The disappointment they feel when history repeats itself is palpable. It's best to move on from such situations. I'm relieved you maintained your self-respect and didn't desperately chase after her, unlike some, he remarked. Honestly, if my fiancé ever started causing drama, I'd end things immediately. Thankfully, I believe I've found the perfect partner. Our experiences are quite similar, even regarding our partner's past involving abusive relationships. You've seen me prove my innocence. I've never been violent towards my wife or anyone else, I declared. True, he agreed, but it's odd how our stories align, isn't it? It's not mere chance, I admitted. I've become the adversary now. His reaction was one of shock. Calm down, Gary, I urged. There's more you don't know about Trisha. How are you aware of her name? He questioned, then sat, waiting for an explanation. Before you met Trisha, my curiosity led me to hire a private investigator. This revealed your involvement, which seemed quite rapid and intense compared to mine, I noted. He appeared uneasy yet nodded in agreement. Treasure these moments. My advice, stay inventive and adaptable to prolong the magic. Currently, you're her hero, confronting the supposed villain to save her. But beware, once her interest wanes, you might find yourself labeled the villain. I even reached out to her ex-husband. My 7-year marriage to Trisha was the longest she's had. I hope you can surpass the record and... He interrupted, how many times has she been married? I assumed you were her first, so you were actually her second. Gary, I was her 4th spouse, I began. Her first marriage was when she was 20, lasting 3 years. The second husband was around for 5 years. The man before me managed nearly 4 years. And, like me, he never mistreated her. I mistook him for some kind of brute, but he was just a regular guy, struggling to keep the relationship because he truly cared for her. Even after he discovered my involvement, he was ready to forgive her. My feelings weren't as deep. When I learned about you, I negotiated to avoid any financial support, and she simply moved on to you. You should be cautious, Gary. She's nearing 40, and soon she'll seek stability. If you don't watch out, you might end up bearing the financial burden. How can we be sure it's her? Gary questioned. I handed him my wallet, filled with photos of Trisha, showcasing our shared moments like vacations and holidays, always appearing joyful and close. It's definitely her, he confirmed, a mix of sorrow and frustration in his tone. Doesn't she look unhappy? I joked cynically. Must be my fault, right? A waitress nearby approached us. Just wrapping up here, I told her. Oh, it's not about that, she replied, her hair flowing as she leaned in closer. Heard you're separating from Trisha. Let me know when you're ready to date again. I'd like to be considered. After she left, I continued. I'm sharing this hoping you'll fare better than I did. I plan to relocate and start anew to avoid the memories shared with Trisha. If you ever need to find me, you won't have to. And seriously, think about a prenuptial agreement, especially one that safeguards you in case of infidelity. He took a nervous sip of his beer as I explained. From what I've seen, she's unpredictable, thriving on secrecy and the thrill. Initially, it spices things up, but then she grows bored and looks for another savior. When you're cast as the villain, remember, it's not you who's at fault. The real issue is Trisha. Just keep that in mind, and you'll get through it. I'm already planning some dates, looking forward to new possibilities. With a wave to the waitress, I left, leaving Gary to ponder everything. I left the bar, slid into my car, and zoomed off. Feeling liberated for the first time in ages, I sensed a new chapter in my life was beginning, despite the dubious start with the sham of a lie detector test. Yet, in a strange way, I had been honest and perhaps made things slightly better for whoever was next in line. Arriving home, I opted for a quiet dinner on my deck. I popped a pre-cooked lemon pepper turkey breast into the oven and lit the fire pit, engaging in some light exercise while waiting for the meal. Fitness wasn't a major concern, but with the newfound freedom from a demanding partner, I was keen on improving myself. I was determined that my future partner would be nothing like the last, deserving of genuine affection. My thoughts were interrupted by the doorbell. Peering through the peephole, I saw Trisha. She greeted me with a smile, claiming her key didn't work and asked about her belongings and the enticing aroma wafting through the air. I reminded her of the morning's events, the signed divorce papers, her moving out, and the changed locks. She attempted to downplay her actions, suggesting a hormonal imbalance or a test to gauge my commitment. She expressed a desire to cancel the divorce, requesting to move back in and share the meal I had prepared. I pointed out her recent neglect, which she brushed off with a promise of renewed attention and affection. Deciding to deal with her belongings later, I led her inside, recognizing her efforts to mend our relationship. We spent the night reconnecting, and in the early hours, I carried her downstairs, feeling a complex mix of satisfaction and contemplation. "You haven't shown this much affection in ages," she exclaimed, her voice filled with nostalgia. "It reminds me of our honeymoon days. You used to pamper me endlessly, then carry me to the kitchen for a meal. But this time, as we reached the stairs, I didn't head towards the kitchen. Instead, I walked straight to the front door, opened it, stepped onto the porch, descended the steps, and without ceremony, left Trisha outside before returning inside. Moments later, she was pounding on the door, confusion and anger in her voice. "Why would you do that?" she demanded. "I expressed my love for you. We're reunited. How can you treat me this way after our intimate moment?" "It was just physical," I replied curtly. "Excuse me." She was puzzled. "What happened between us was merely physical, devoid of love. Your failure to recognize the difference makes me question if you ever truly loved me, or anyone for that matter. We're not getting back together, Trisha. You wanted the divorce," I complied. "The documents are finalized and filed. We can always reverse that decision," she argued. "But I don't wish to," I declared firmly. "And let's be honest, you're only here because Gary saw through you and left before making a grave error. Luckily, I've learned from the past. I refuse to be your safety net." "But we just shared a moment," she stuttered, her voice tinged with accusation. "You just exploited me," she spat, enraged. "You're heartless." "Absolutely," I responded with a smirk, shutting the door and chuckling to myself as I went upstairs for a shower. My comment: "If you are the perfect husband, your wife won't have a reason to cheat." It's human nature to be drawn to something new and exciting. For cheaters, the thrill and excitement of a new partner is more alluring than the friendship and familiarity of a long marriage, no matter how loving their existing relationship. That's why they start seeing someone other than their spouse. Story 2. I recognized her immediately as she entered the restaurant in the lobby of her husband's building. She was tall, slender, and attractive, the epitome of contemporary beauty. She possessed the refined allure of celebrities like Anne Hathaway or Katy Perry, with a seemingly British elegance despite not being from England. I pondered, what happened to the kind of women I represented? Are we out of fashion now? I couldn't believe that men would choose those slender, high-maintenance types over a woman with a more voluptuous figure. If that's the trend, I thought, I might as well not bother as I grow older. The scene was set. She took a seat at a table, glancing at her watch. Soon, a man in an unremarkable suit joined her. He was average in height, neither slim nor overweight, blending into the background. He seemed like the typical unnoticed office worker, managing tasks, but never at the forefront of major projects or decisions. As he sat down, her expression brightened, a highlight of her day. She seemed oblivious to the situation's reality. I felt a twinge of pity for her simplicity. The man, unaware of the impending complications, engaged her in light-hearted banter, eliciting her laughter. They were enjoying themselves, and I realized I had to act quickly. They say a woman can gauge her interest in a man within seconds of meeting him. The look in her eyes suggested she was considering the possibilities, albeit not immediately. I knew then that my task was challenging. I'm Sally, and I work for an investigative agency in California. My role isn't strictly that of an investigator, I'm more of a decoy, although some might label me differently. But I embrace my reputation. It's something I've earned through dedication and enjoyable experiences. My career has been fulfilling, and retirement is on the horizon. This particular job is more of a personal endeavor, benefiting both an old friend and myself. I represent the classic allure with long blonde hair, striking blue eyes, and a figure that once turned heads effortlessly. Despite being 62, my appearance is well maintained through careful grooming and fitness routines. Let's just say, I've kept my charm, and I'm confident in the impact I have. Besides, my appearance could be entirely unremarkable, yet I'd still excel in my profession. Many men, believing their actions remain unnoticed, aren't particularly discerning in their choices. How else could one explain the unexpected pregnancies discussed on daytime talk shows? Many women who are perceived as promiscuous possess an allure, perhaps a pheromonal charm, that attracts men effortlessly. These men sense an opportunity that demands little from their wallets or their energy. They understand that with minimal effort, they can engage intimately without any subsequent obligations or remorse, ready for a repeat encounter whenever desired. This level of convenience is hard to find elsewhere. Even at my age, I find no difficulty in attracting male attention. As I seated myself near my intended target and her companion, I subtly signaled my availability. Soon, I was joined by various men, each responding to my unspoken invitation. After leaving the venue with my newfound company, I made a passing remark to my target about her makeup needing a slight touch-up. By the time she reached the restroom, she discovered me in a compromising position, which visibly shocked her. Despite this, I maintained a pleasant demeanor, amused by her evident disapproval of my actions in such a setting. Once alone, I quickly recomposed myself, mindful of maintaining my professional image in public. Returning to my table, I observed a shift in the dynamic between my target and her companion. After a discreet phone call, her boyfriend hastily departed, his discomfort apparent. Addressing her, I commented on the inevitability of our similar paths, only to be met with her skeptical response. Her accent struck me as affected, prompting thoughts of a cultural facade that some adopt for an air of sophistication. I don't have a particular issue with the English, but I really can't stand anything that's insincere. It's almost amusing, like the whole Madonna situation. She was raised in Michigan, near Detroit, and now she speaks as if she's royalty. It's hard to understand who she's trying to impress. Listen, sweetheart, I began. Before we jump to conclusions, let's have a chat. She approached and took a seat opposite me. You're married, aren't you? Certainly not to the fellow who just left, I observed. How did you figure that out? She inquired. Judging by his attire and accessories, it's clear he couldn't afford your lifestyle. Those Donny no heels you're wearing. They're worth a fortune, easily more than he earns in a couple of years. Plus, there's a fresh tan line where his wedding ring should be. That suggests he's hiding his marital status. If you were his wife, he wouldn't need to conceal it. It seems like your husband, given the luxurious gifts he buys, adores you a lot. Yet, from your expression, I sense that despite his love, he's often buried in work, leaving you feeling isolated and restless. Am I right? She nodded, her gaze filled with curiosity. Then this guy comes along, showering you with compliments, making you feel special. Gradually, you've been meeting him more often, craving the attention. Be honest, am I on track? She nodded again, this time uneasily. I knew it, I said. It's a familiar path, one that I've walked myself. It might take years, or maybe less, but the pattern is clear. Let me share a story with you, okay? Renee, she offered. Bingo, Renee Coulter was exactly who I was looking for. I had a hunch from the start, but with so many people around, certainty was elusive. I began, Renee, your story mirrors mine. A young, attractive married woman, with a loving husband and a beautiful home. I married my high school sweetheart right after his college graduation, and we built our life together. My husband, Ronnie, worked tirelessly to afford the luxuries I desired. Over time, my wish list grew longer and more extravagant. Ronnie never complained, just worked harder to fulfill my demands. Similar to you, left alone frequently, I felt a growing emptiness. I tried filling it with social clubs, community work, and various groups, but the loneliness persisted. Eventually, I foolishly convinced myself that Ronnie was neglecting our marriage, focused solely on his job. I erroneously believed he preferred working over spending leisure time with me, like playing golf or enjoying his car. That's how I got to know Arthur, or Arthur Lang, a neighbor who lived down the street. He ran a home-based business, something to do with medical billing. He seemed to always be around. Gradually, for reasons I can't quite pinpoint, Arthur started dropping by for coffee and would listen to my troubles. It felt good to have someone to confide in. It brought me some relief. Before Arthur came into the picture, I was, without realizing it, taking out my frustration on Ronnie, my husband. I was under the impression that our marriage was struggling because of him, and in response, I became less intimate with him. Our intimate encounters decreased significantly, something Ronnie couldn't help but notice. He may not have paid attention to the new curtains or the rug I bought because those things didn't seem to matter to him much, but the change in our intimacy was something he was acutely aware of. Ronnie, being the considerate person he is, didn't confront me aggressively about it. He assumed it was just a phase I was going through. He tried to cheer me up with flowers, chocolates, and a card, patiently waiting for things to get better. Meanwhile, he spent his spare time working on his cherished 1970 Boss Mustang, his lifelong passion. As time went on, Arthur's attention became more frequent, leading to daily coffee visits. His flattery started to affect me, and our meetings evolved from casual chats to physical interaction, and eventually to intimate encounters. I found myself in an affair, believing that Arthur and I had something special. Reflecting on my experiences with both men, I realized they approached intimacy differently. What I had mistaken for a lack of passion in Ronnie was actually his way of expressing love. He was always gentle and attentive. Arthur, however, was more aggressive and thoughtless. I should have recognized the warning signs in their behavior. Ronnie cherished his Mustang and treated it with care, just as he did with me. Arthur, however, neglected his own car, which should have been a clue to how he viewed our relationship. A turning point came when I fell ill with pneumonia and needed hospital care. Arthur refused to help, citing potential risks, while Ronnie, upon receiving my call at work, rushed to take me to the hospital. Arthur tried to justify his absence by claiming Ronnie was more suitable to help because he was my husband, insinuating that Ronnie saw me as a possession, whereas he claimed to truly love me. There was something off about his tone, prompting me to probe further. Ronnie had been my constant companion in the hospital, while Arthur never visited. Once discharged, I decided to test them both, mentioning a doctor's advice to abstain from intimacy for a month. Ronnie responded with understanding and patience, affirming his love and willingness to wait. The reaction from Arthur was starkly different, leading to a month of absence and my gradual realization of his true intentions. He wasn't in love, he was just using me, and I discovered he was involved with other women in the area. Upon confronting Arthur and threatening to expose the affair, he was indifferent, highlighting the potential ruin of my marriage and reputation, confident in his continued control over me. Arthur's demeanor shifted dramatically, gone were the caring visits and affection, replaced by derogatory treatment and exploitative demands. I yearned for my previous life as Ronnie's loyal wife, recognizing the manipulation and degradation Arthur had subjected me to. Everything unraveled when Ronnie returned home early one day, catching Arthur and me in a compromising situation. In a fit of rage, Ronnie physically attacked Arthur, leading to his arrest. I drained our savings to bail him out, but he refused to communicate with me directly, arranging through a friend to collect his belongings from our home. Desperate for reconciliation, I sought an opportunity to explain and seek forgiveness, but faced the harsh reality of our broken relationship. I decided I'd return after an hour and a half, hoping to reconcile with him before he departed. I believed his love for me could pave the way for forgiveness if I approached him correctly, but I was mistaken about Ronnie's intentions. In no time, he had packed his belongings and left. A week later, the divorce papers arrived. Ronnie had relinquished everything we owned, except for his clothes and that cherished Mustang. The house, furniture, and all our financial assets were left to me. He hadn't taken a single penny, not even for his own sustenance. Art chose not to pursue legal action to avoid publicity, so the matter was quietly resolved. Ronnie, having borrowed some money from a friend, relocated to another state. Our paths never crossed again. Eventually, I learned he had remarried, found happiness, and had children. It was the life I had envisioned for us before my mistakes led me astray. The memory of the hurt in Ronnie's eyes during our last encounter still haunts me. I recognize his love and the pain I caused. My love for him remained, and it's a sentiment I carry to this day, despite decades of separation. The loss of what we had is my deepest regret. After squandering the wealth Ronnie and I had amassed, I sold the house and moved to an apartment, ready to start anew. When I felt ready to date again, I promised myself not to repeat past mistakes. That's when I met Ed, my second husband, a lawyer. Determined to make this marriage work, I sought employment to keep busy. Ed supported this decision and helped me land a job as a secretary in an insurance sales office. I made it clear to my colleagues that I was committed to my marriage, subtly weaving Ed into conversations to underline my loyalty. This approach helped establish boundaries and integrate me into the team. We shared good times and faced challenges together, maintaining a strong camaraderie. However, after 3 years, the dynamics began to change. In my mind, I was just one of the guys, but you know how it is. Attractiveness and physical attributes can be distracting, no matter how much they're supposed to be ignored. One evening, after sealing a significant deal, we didn't celebrate out on the town. Instead, we stayed in, drinking. Myself and 4 colleagues consumed alcohol as if we were connoisseurs. I can't recall the amount I drank, but that night took a turn I barely remembered later. A week on, they reminded me of that night's events, much of which I'd forgotten, and coerced me into a similar situation to keep it from my husband. I felt trapped. Now, Ed, being a lawyer, was much more astute than Ronnie had been. A few weeks later, after another regrettable night, I was desperate for an escape before Ed discovered the truth. He offered me one unexpectedly. I was at home, fresh from a shower, when I heard Ed's distinctive car, a 1992 Mustang GT. I've always had a thing for muscle cars. Ed entered and summoned me to the kitchen. Without any pleasantries, he got straight to the point, asking about Teresa, his new secretary. Describing her as a woman with long curly hair and an impressive figure, he coldly announced she would be taking my place. He presented me with divorce papers, offering a modest settlement, confident in his legal prowess. I retorted, mocking his proposal, confident that a judge would grant me more, especially if I exposed his intentions to replace me with a younger woman. Ed, unfazed, revealed photos and evidence of my indiscretions, threatening my legal standing and bargaining power. He revealed his prior knowledge of my actions, thanks to a private investigator, undermining my confidence and position entirely. I finalized the divorce and temporarily settled into a modest motel while searching for a more permanent residence. I was profoundly affected by the ordeal, reflecting on my past actions with Ronnie. Years after my divorce, I discovered that Ed had grown tired of me, having developed feelings for Teresa. Despite my loyalty, Ed wanted out but wished to protect his financial interests. Ed orchestrated a situation where I was led to drink excessively, expecting me to confess the incident, thus giving him grounds to end our marriage. When I kept silent, possibly wary from past experiences like with Arthur, he arranged another incident, gathering evidence to use against me. I was utterly outmaneuvered, all because Ed wanted to replace me with someone younger. Throughout this time, Ed was aggressive towards me, contrasted with Teresa's reserved nature, who was saving herself for marriage. Eventually, Ed's plan backfired as Teresa changed over the years, leading to a strained marriage devoid of intimacy, with her constantly monitoring him. These experiences revealed the harsh realities of Ed's character and my own self-awareness. It taught me that some men will seek physical gratification regardless of consequences unless they have compelling reasons at home. However, maintaining a relationship isn't solely about physical attractiveness. It's about mutual satisfaction and respect, and sometimes having children can influence a man's commitment. I realized my own desire for physical intimacy, leading me to pursue relationships on my terms, valuing independence and control. Reflecting on these insights, I warned a friend about the man she was involved with, highlighting the unlikelihood of him leaving his wife for her, especially if children were involved, and cautioning her about the limitations of what he could offer in terms of emotional and financial support. Getting involved with that person is like a day at the beach that ends badly. It might seem enticing at first, but in the end, you're just left with discomfort, confused memories, and an unpleasant feeling. Your husband probably adores you, working tirelessly to provide for you. Perhaps you should just talk to him, share your feelings, and he'll likely make an effort to spend more quality time with you. That's what you're seeking, right? The other option is to pursue a fleeting affair, leading only to disappointment and turmoil, especially when your husband finds out. And eventually, he will. That revelation will leave you one step closer to my current state, experienced but alone, wealthy yet lonely. I've had my share of encounters, yet I'm without a partner who truly cares. I often ponder what could have been with Ronnie. If this is the path you want, you're on the right track. Think carefully about what I've told you, and take care of yourself, I advised her as I left. I exited, leaving her to ponder my words, and entered an office where a younger man awaited. "Hi, Aunt Sally," he greeted, a bit tersely. "Did it make an impact?" "I'm pretty sure she'll reconsider her thoughts on infidelity," I responded. "How did things go on your side?" He shared a smile. I took some initial steps at his workplace, which led to revealing his dubious actions. His employment was terminated under a moral clause, compelling him to confess to his wife. "Looks like everything is in place," I noted. He handed me an envelope. "Here's your payment." Ronnie, now 64, lives alone in Ohio since his wife passed. Despite everything, I believe he's never stopped loving you. Perhaps it's time for reconciliation. The story encapsulated a mix of wisdom, regret, and the complexities of past relationships, aiming for a resolution rooted in honesty and reflection. "Would you have forgiven Renee?" I asked. "Post-divorce, it wouldn't have made a difference, Aunt Sally," he replied gently. "There wouldn't have been much left to salvage." "Your divorce attorneys must be top-notch," I commented. "Who are they?" "The law firm of Smith & Wesson," he answered with gravity. "Thank you again for your assistance. Saving her wouldn't have been possible without you. I truly love her, but infidelity is something I can't stand. She gets this one warning. I plan to reduce my work hours and spend more time at home." "Anyone could have done what I did," I responded. "I'm not extraordinary, just another woman trying to make things right." Leaving the office, I took out my cell phone and arranged a flight to Ohio. Perhaps it's not too late for change. My comment: if the wife still cheats, she deserves having her divorce notification served.